So I thought maybe we could just start off just kind of like with some background information, because
Yes.
I don't want to make the assumption that everyone here knows what a social justice warrior is, or kind of like your background in that. So can you take us through kind of oh shoot, you sent me your bio. I totally forgot to read it, but you can tell us.
Okay, yes. So I currently host a podcast called Unsafe Space. We currently have two shows we do. One's called Covfefe Break. It's a live show we do Mondays and Fridays. It's kind of current events with my co-host and the founder of Unsafe Space, Carter Laren. And then we also do a very specific show called Deprogrammed. We just released a new episode today of Deprogrammed. Deprogrammed is more of a deep dive. It's meant to be a deep dive into my old belief system, which I most often call SJW ideology. And like you said, I was a true believer. I was indoctrinated into this belief system in college over 20 years ago. I preached it with fervor. I was one of the people trying to reteach they have new definitions for words, right? So I was one of the people trying to teach people, no, this is what racism really means, prejudice plus power. I was doing that 20 years ago on early feminist message boards before it reached the mainstream like it has today. And, sexism is prejudice plus power, all of those redefinitions. I was dyed in the wool. And over a period of about 2 or 3 years, I started coming out of it. And I call it a cult of belief. It is very much like a cult. It takes a while to come out of it when you're that deeply in it. And it certainly wasn't, one day I woke up. It was a slow transformation. But once I realized what the belief system really is, it maybe because I spent so long pushing it. I pushed it in my career. I was a comedy manager and producer. I managed comedians. At the height of my career, I produced a television show on FX called Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell, who I tended to represent, for the most part, comedians who shared my ideology. I used my career, like a lot of SJWs do, to push my ideology. That's why you see it in all these companies, corporations, entertainment, everything, media. They're all taught at school, like I was, to become activists for this belief system. And so I used it to push that. That show that we produced, I produced that show with Chris Rock. I think of it as one of the first SJW comedy shows. And after that, we saw just an influx of them. And I started coming out of my belief system shortly after, a couple years after that. So because I spent so much time pushing it, maybe that's the reason I feel like it's so important to talk about what it is and what it's not. And I feel like my purpose has become speaking about the dangers and the evil of this belief system and trying to help people like get a grasp for what it really is.
Yeah.
Did that answer?
I think it is great. And I think that, we're seeing it really is like a cult. I mean, I've been seeing people have been sending me all these documents that their organizations have been sending them lately about, how to get more involved and how to support, oppressed populations. And it's insidious like a cult, because it starts out so innocent and it starts out so kind of, you feel like you're on the side of fundamental good. And I was looking through this document. Someone sent me a big PDF from the American Cancer Society that they sent all their employees last night. And I was kind of looking through it, and it was simple things like, oh, you can read White Fragility, and here's a list of books that you can read with your kid, and why don't you donate to these causes? And how it kind of seems to me is it reminds me of things like Scientology or Landmark, which are also cults, but they start out good. They start out with the little nuggets of like wisdom that's built on ancient wisdom. And so it works for you and it makes people feel good because it's not stuff they invented, it's stuff they appropriated. But once you get past those little nuggets of wisdom, all of a sudden you're paying them all your money to be taught how to live life in their terms, and you're in a cult before you even realize it.
You're exactly right. There's a lot of people making a lot of money off of the belief system as well. Robin DiAngelo being one of them. And they have, once you start to learn a little bit more about the belief system, you'll recognize they recommend the same reading list over and over. It's even infiltrated. I want to talk about how it's everywhere now. It's infiltrated the church. It's infiltrated atheist groups. It's infiltrated knitting, which is where you and I met. Yeah. It's in the sewing world. It's in gaming. It's in entertainment. And now you're seeing it. It's so mainstream. It's become so mainstream that now we are seeing corporations, large corporations, all speaking the words, speaking the words the cult wants them to speak, putting out, because it has become that dominant. So Spotify is now speaking these words. Amazon is now speaking these words. The Democratic Party is now speaking these words. And it's the reading list they send out. It was in my church group, the church I used to go to in Austin. I'm in a women's group. Somebody was recommending, here's a list of books about racial justice to read with your children. It's an indoctrination list is what it is. It's teaching children racism and collectivism in the name of ending those things. That's why I often call it an evil ideology. The reason I call it evil is because there are a lot of people in it with bad intentions who are just there for power, money, fame, what have you, or they're there because, like the company, like the corporations, it's what's popular right now.
Right. They don't really care about it.
They don't really care. They're just saying what is in vogue, what's in style, what's in fashion right now. But then there's a lot of people in it who, with really good intent, like I was in it. That's how I know there are people in it who believe it, who are true believers, who want to do good. That's why I call it evil, because it takes people who want to fight things like racism and sexism, and it turns them into puppets, into mouthpieces for the exact things they think they're fighting. It turns them into mouthpieces for racism and sexism. And the way that one of the ways it does that is that it redefines words. Mm-hmm. So it tells you racism doesn't mean what we know it to mean. It doesn't mean judging people on the basis of race and treating them differently on the basis of race. It means prejudice plus power. Therefore, it is impossible to be racist towards one specific race that we've decided has collective power. Like that's how they do it, is they change the words. Then they can get you to go out and preach to people that the way to end racism is somehow by treating people differently and judging people differently on the basis of race. How do they get people to do that if they oppose racism? They change the definitions.
Right. I mean, I saw this last night. I think it was the governor of Kentucky has announced that all Black people in Kentucky are going to get free health care. And I was like, wow, that's racist. You can't do that. But the only way the only way to make that argument is the prejudice plus power argument, right?
Yes.
Because it can't be racist if we're using that argument. But it's insane.